37,500, but the Chief Executive said that the training courses, which are normally part of the membership for other organisations, are extra or separate. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, you did, through your worship, and that would be quite standard procedure if you think about the council accessing employer and manufacturer course training.
No, I'm just talking about the Property Council. Normally in the Property Council, those benefits are included in the membership, which is around about 15,000 for the big players. So we're paying a lot more than that, and we're not getting the full cost of our membership, because on one hand, you're told that for 37,500 you get all sorts of networking opportunities and communications and training and all the rest of it, but it seems that the training for us is an add-on, and it would be good to get some transparency around that. I'm intrigued about the training, if I can be, Mr Mayor. Who goes to the training courses? What officers go to the training courses? What are they trained on? And whereabouts are these training courses taking place? That would be useful to know. I want to come back to the all-important issue of conflict of interest, because, and I suppose it's not new, but I'm not entirely impressed by the legal advice. I am more impressed by the paper put out by the Auditor General, Managing Conflicts of Interest, Guidance for Public Entities. And it makes a number of points. I'm not going to be long about this, but I think we need to hear them. The public entity needs to consider whether there is a reasonable risk that the situation could undermine public trust and confidence in the member or official or the public entity. A lot of our legal advice seems to focus on members, not the official or the public entity. I'm concerned about the public entity. Public perceptions are important. It is not enough that public sector members or officials are honest and fair. They should also be clearly seen to be so, and so should the public entity. And another point, it relates to the public. Where activities are paid for by public funds or are carried out in the public interest, members of Parliament, the media and the public will have high expectations. They expect people who work in the public sector to act impartially without any possibility that they could be influenced by favouritism or improper personal motives, or that public resources could be misused for private benefit. And just one more point. And what I pick up from the tenor of the legal advice is there's no conflict of interest. And the very fact that the legal advisor company is a member of the Property Council, that's not a conflict of interest either. But conversely, the best advice we have on managing conflicts of interest are simply to declare it and say, yes, there is a conflict. And then there are a number of logical steps to proceed after that. I just want to go back to the Auditor General again, who reminds us that there are no universal rules, but each public entity's own circumstances are likely to be different and likely to generate different problems. Greater strictness might be appropriate for certain types of entity or function. And then I'll just say, managing of conflicts of interest is a fundamental part of good public sector administration, and you don't manage conflicts of interest by denying there's no conflict of interest at all. It would be better to admit there is a conflict of interest, at least an appearance of a conflict of interest, and in this situation, appearances are everything. Regardless, as the Auditor General reminds us, of any relevant legal rules, ethical considerations should always be taken into account when seeking to identify and manage a conflict of interest in the public sector. And what are those ethical considerations, those ethical expectations? Public business ought to be conducted with a spirit of integrity, honesty, transparency, openness, independence, good faith, and service to the public. Mr. Mayor, the notice of motion is to remove a conflict of interest or an appearance of conflict of interest in our relationship with the Property Council of New Zealand. What we need to ask ourselves is, does this pass the pub test? Does this pass the RSA test? Does this stack up to ordinary members of the public, especially those members of the public who are currently struggling before the Unitary Plan Independent Panel, up against high-paid lawyers, which the public themselves are actually paying for and or contributing to? And I refer to the Property Council and our membership, which I understand is the biggest fee-paying membership. I want to see the situation where our relationship with the Property Council of New Zealand is reset to one of respect, of professional respect and professional distance. That is the appropriate role for us as an honest broker regulator. The public currently, as we saw at the extraordinary meeting that was held in February, are deeply concerned about what is going on in Auckland. They're deeply concerned about how the council is working. They're deeply concerned, have been deeply concerned about changes being put forward to the Unitary Plan without notification. The meeting we had, the extraordinary meeting, was all about process, was all about fair play and civil rights, and the rule of law, for equality of the law for all Aucklanders. And I think what we want to avoid is getting to a situation where the interlocking relationships between the regulator, the council, and the Property Council, and other lobby groups are managed, that we don't get into a situation, as we've seen in America, where virtually the whole country is up in arms about the power of lobbyists and the cosy relationship between lobbyists and legislators and regulators in Washington. We want to avoid that situation, and here is an opportunity for us to put this right and to reset our relationship with the Property Council of New Zealand, not as a member, not as one of the team, but apart, respectful and distant as a regulator, a statutory regulator on behalf of the whole community. Thank you.
Councillor Mike. I see it quite simply.
20,000 an hour, just wasted.
The simple issue underlying this is the relationship between us and our CEO. And this CEO in particular, who we elected as our CEO unanimously together. And there were very, very clear discussions about where we would draw the line between what the CEO is doing and what we're doing. And the line is drawn here, my view. We have delegated him this responsibility to look after us and to manage this in an appropriate way. And nothing I've heard here today changes that. I have heard various views about the fact that this body has personally attacked me or has attacked us. I see no difference between this body and every other body around here that attacks us.
Every day, mate.
And quite frankly, if you're going to choose this, why not choose a whole bunch of other organisations that we're a part of, who have also been submitters to the Unitary Plan? Councillors, I ask you, So you know the reason why we handed over this responsibility to the Chief Executive Officer? To stop these types of debates and to keep us safe. And that is what the lawyers are saying more than anything.
Yep.
This is not the way Auckland used to be, where the politicians are step all over the operational side and the operational side sometimes step into the political side.
Sounds like the ARC.
This is not that Auckland. We have actually drawn some quite clear delegations. And we've put, in this instance, our appropriate trust in the person of the CEO to manage that relationship. And his advice to us, which we all agreed is what he should do, is there's no conflict. Now then you can go to a broader, the court of public opinion, and say, well, the CEO's got no role in that, it's just about perceptions. So the court of a public opinion was here today, Lisa Prager and Penny Bright, and they gave it to us, which we've heard for the last 5 or 6 years. And the message has been unrelenting, corrupt, fraud, the whole thing, about this structure and about corporate Auckland. So, are we going to follow that? Or are we actually going to follow what I have been driving for the last 6 years, and that is reliable, consistent decision-making? And being consistent to what we have decided to do here, and that is leave this body of work to our Chief Executive Officer. Because if we start here, we'll just keep going right through the whole lot. And then where does that put us? We get every membership back in here and debate every single bit of it. And that is not what we agreed. We are total about face and a complete abrogation of everything that we've agreed for the last 5.5 years, quite frankly. So it's just not what's at stake here. It's just not about the issue that Mike and Councillor Cathy have been driving, perceived conflicts or otherwise, is actually how we have set ourselves up and whether or not we trust our judgment in that space and trust the judgment of our Chief Executive Officer. And one, I am totally supportive of why we set this up and for all the reasons that the lawyers have pointed out. But we need to be reminded of, and for listening to the advice that we've got from our Chief Executive Officer on this matter. And so do I feel that I've got a conflict with this particular organisation? Probably. Half the time I have a conflict with what they say about me or my leadership or how we're going as a council. It's no different from any other, quite frankly. And is this unitary plan only about development? It's about a whole range of other things within the concept of development. And so we have 250 organisations that we are partners with and that we have memberships of. But in amongst that, probably half them have submitted one way or another into the Auckland plan, into the unitary plan, on a whole range of things. Historical issues, architectural issues, transportation issues, a whole range of issues, aside from the specific issue of development. So the bottom line advice was, and Stephen was absolutely right in getting appropriate advice because we're going into an important decision-making process. The bottom line advice is we're safe where we are. And it's best to leave these decisions, which we decided 6 years ago and reaffirmed 3 years ago, it's best to leave these decisions relating to these types of bodies usefully with the Chief Executive Officer, because once we start getting involved, we start getting ourselves in trouble. And we start opening ourselves up for real accusations of bias and predetermination. So, councillors, my advice to you and my leadership on this matter is that I certainly respect the fact that this was brought to the table exactly the same way as I respect it was brought to the table 3 years ago. It was a timely discussion, but we cannot now just do an about face on what we've decided in terms of our delegations with the Chief Executive Officer and do it on spurious grounds, to say the least. There's no substance here at all, as against anything else, for us to be declaring a conflict and to take the duly delegated authority we've given to the CEO back on this ground or any other ground. we've got to stay the path here and be consistent and reliable in our decision-making and how we've set this up.